Today we will review about the carbon footprint of building. Life cycle assessment of building has become an essential tool for minimizing the environmental impact of construction and enabling the construction sector to move towards sustainability. There are 4 life cycle phases of building. First one is product stage. Product stage encompasses carbon emission derived from the process of producing building materials, including the extraction of their raw components, their subsequent manufacturing process, and their transportation. Second one is the construction stage. Construction stage refer to activities between the manufacturing and operational stage. Third one is operational stage. The operational phase account for the majority of CO2 emission in the life cycle building and generally reflect the behavior of user and the society high dependence on fossil fuels, especially to generate electricity. Lastly, end of life stage. The demolished material is assumed to be landfill. In most studies that consider the impact of the end use stage. In conclusion, the operational phase is by far the most impactful life cycle phase of building, mostly because of the continuous carbon emission associated with the energy consumption over the extended lifespan. Thank you.
The origin of footprints. Footprints are first developed by the two researchers, which are William E. Rees and Matthijs Wackenagel. This is a part of a Wackenagel PhD research at the University of British Columbia in early 1990. Carbon footprint is one of a family of footprint indicators, also include ecological footprints, water footprint, and land footprints. The idea of personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company in 2005. It also instructs people to calculate their personal footprint, provide ways to people go on low carbon diet. Footprint has synonymous with human behavior and impacts on our planets. It allows us to grapple with overshoot possibly the largest risk for humanity in 21st century.
Since cheese is made from cow's milk and livestock farming is one of the biggest sources of GHG emission, making 1 kg hard cheese can result in the production of 12 kg of CO2. Additionally, methane gas, which also emits in large amount, is 23 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Overall, producing 1 kg of cheese generates the same amount of CO2 as driving a car 6 kilometers or planting 12 kilograms of carrots. So, for the solution, choose a softer cheese made with less meat.
What happens if carbon emits excessively? As we all know, human activities are primarily responsible for almost all of the increase in greenhouse gases emissions in the last 150 years, with the largest contributor being the burning of fossil fuels from the industries. And due to the economic sectors that being the biggest contributor, carbon dioxide makes up the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions from the sector. However, we also have to know that the smaller amounts of methane and nitrous oxide are also emitted. So, what will happen? In a long term, the emissions of carbon will lead to heat wave, pollution, insect plagues, natural disasters such as hurricanes, fires, and others. Also, the emissions will negatively impact our ocean, which will lead to the extinction of natural coral reef and increase in acid levels.
3 ways to reduce carbon footprint in transportation. The first one is life car free. Going carless for a year could save about 2.6 tons of carbon dioxide. The second one is pedestrians. Even though pedestrians far outnumber drivers in most urban environments, cars dominate the physical landscape. Pedestrians should reclaim some of this space in many cities. And the third one is take public transportation. Public transportation is the most environmental friendly way to travel long distances in short periods of time.
This video is about carbon footprint of the knowledge sector. The study attempts to quantify the knowledge sector's carbon footprint from information creation to dissemination and consumption, and to offer comparison for digital access and delivery. Based on the study, there is a significant amount of carbon dioxide produced by the current methods for printing and distributing knowledge items, 1.8 million tons, and approximately 11.27 million tons of carbon dioxide are produced by the book industries alone in the United Kingdom and the United States, respectively. An estimated 12 million tons of carbon dioxide are released globally by the journal publishing sector each year. For example, in 2007, production of the journal fuel was just over 40 tons of carbon dioxide and an ecological footprint of almost 21 global hectares. The study also shows the importance of the knowledge sectors and the huge growth potential that should be developed. But in order to achieve economic and environmental sustainability, as well as promote knowledge incentive activities and knowledge-based decision-making across all sectors, it is important to take early action to make the knowledge industry more sustainable.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Sarif here. I would like to share with you guys about sustainable lifestyle. What are sustainable lifestyle? So, it's understanding how our lifestyle choices affect the world around us, and finding ways for everyone to live better and lighter is what sustainable living entails. Applying a people lens to sustainability is novel, timely, and full of opportunities.
Now we go to the definition of carbon footprint. Okay, what is the carbon footprint? Carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases, including the carbon dioxide and methane, generated by human activity. According to the World Health Organization, a carbon footprint is a measure of the impact human activities have on the amount of carbon dioxide produced through the burning of fossil fuels, and it's expressed as the weight of carbon dioxide emissions produced in tons. Then, Mulvaney, 2022 also states that carbon footprint is the sum total of all the greenhouse gas emissions that had to take place in order for a product to be produced, for an activity to take place. Now we go to the definition of carbon footprint. Okay, what is the carbon footprint? Carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases, including the carbon dioxide and methane, generated by human activity. According to the World Health Organization, a carbon footprint is a measure of the impact human activities have on the amount of carbon dioxide produced through the burning of fossil fuels, and it's expressed as the weight of carbon dioxide emissions produced in tons. Then, Mulvaney, 2022 also states that carbon footprint is the sum total of all the greenhouse gas emissions that had to take place in order for a product to be produced, for an activity to take place. Next is the current status of the carbon footprint. When we look at Figure 1, the highest percentages of countries producing carbon footprint is the rest of the world, which is 33.4%. However, it represents a balanced country other than those 10 countries shown in Figure 1. When we look in terms of countries, the highest percentage is China, which is 27.2%. This is because China has a big population. Then followed by the USA, which is 15.6%. Figure 2 shows the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions in Malaysia. We can see that the line is increasing every year. This is because the total carbon dioxide emission produced in Malaysia increases every single year. For example, it increases by around 1 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. Thus, carbon dioxide emissions are on course to increase by close to 300 million tons in 2022 to 33.8 billion tons. The rise in global carbon dioxide emissions would be much larger in 2022. The increase in carbon dioxide is driven by power generation and by the aviation sector as air travel rebounds from pandemic lows. Lastly, there are 5 sources of carbon footprint, which are transportation, industry, electric power, commercial and residential, and agriculture. First is transportation. The transportation sector generates the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions come from burning fossil fuel for cars, trucks, ships, trains, and planes. Over 90% of the fuel used for transportation is petroleum-based and also includes primarily gasoline and diesel. The second is electric power. Electric power generates the second largest greenhouse gases. 60% of electricity comes from burning fossil fuels. For example, burning coal to produce electric power. The third is industry. Greenhouse gas emissions from the industry come from burning fossil for energy. The factory used fuel to produce the goods. Fourth is commercial and residential. Greenhouse gas emission from businesses and homes is from burning fossil fuel for heat. GHG also can be generated from the use of certain products that contain greenhouse gas in the handling of waste. Lastly is agriculture. Greenhouse gas emission from agriculture comes from livestock. For example, cows, agriculture soils, and rice production.
Hi everyone, today we'll share about carbon footprint estimation in the agriculture sector. Agriculture is the one of source greenhouse gases. GHG emission from agriculture originate mainly in the form of CH4 from rice cultivating system and cattle rearing and N2O from fertilizer management practice. The issue is agriculture covering about 35% of the land area. Agriculture accounts for nearly 13.5% of total global anthropogenic GHG emission, contributing about 25, 50 and 70% of CO2, CH4 and N2O respectively. The solution is increasing the organic carbon content of soil that can keep carbon from entering the atmosphere for centuries, a phenomenon known as carbon sequestration. Then minimizing soil disturbance and increasing organic matter inputs. Therefore, cover crops, mulching, no tillage, organic manure, and decreasing the fallow period are among the recommended management practices. Thank you.
Top 5 countries with the highest carbon emission. What are the top 5 countries that produce more carbon emission? The first ranking is China. China is the largest emitter of carbon dioxide gas in the world, with 10,000 million metric ton emitted in 2020. The second is US. US is the largest second emitter of carbon dioxide with 4,713. Number 3 is India. India is the third largest carbon emission with 2,442. Fourth, Russia. Russia is the fourth largest contributor with 1,577 million. And the last in the number 5 is Japan. Japan is the fifth largest producer of carbon emission with 1,577 million metric tons in 2020.
With 10,668 million metric tons of carbon dioxide gas emitted in 2020, China is the global leader in emission. Fossil fuel, particularly those that burn coal, are the main cause of CO2 emission in China. Coal accounted for around 55% of China's total energy production in 2021, and as coal is high in carbon, burning it in China's power plants, factory, and boiler result in significant atmospheric CO2 emission. Additionally, China is one of the biggest importers of oil, which increased the amount of CO2 emission from the country's usage of automobiles. In the future, China intends to produce more power utilizing nuclear, renewable energy sources, and natural gas in order to lessen its reliance on coal and the overall pollution in the big cities.
Do you know what sector is the biggest contributor to carbon emission? In this video, I am going to give you an exposure on how the sectors contribute to carbon emissions and the changes trends between a span of 3 years in 2016, 2019, and 2022. In 2016, global greenhouse gas emissions were most contributed by energy sector, which is 73.2%, and followed by agriculture, forestry and land use, 18.4%, followed by industry sector 5.2%, and least contributor sector was waste, which is as much as 3.2%. However, the trends changed in 3 years later, which is in 2019. Global emissions were most contributed by industry sector, which is as much as 30%, followed by electricity 26%, agriculture, land use and landfills 21%, transport 16%, and buildings 7%. Also, in 3 years later, which is in 2022, coal is responsible for more emissions than any other fossil fuel, approximately emitted as much as 40%. Meanwhile, oil is the second largest contributor at 32%, while gas and cement production round out the pack at 21% and 4% respectively.
Carbon footprint in flying. Airplanes aren't the world's biggest polluters, but they certainly don't help. If you fly a few times per year, air travel will be a significant part of your individual carbon footprint. The EITA projected that the number of flyers will double over the next 2 decades. Flyers will take 7.8 billion trips annually. Airplanes burn the most fuel when taking off and climbing to cruising altitude. You can reduce your carbon footprint by flying as directly as possible. Connecting flights are often cheaper money-wise, but they're most expensive in terms of carbon count.
Hi, this video is about carbon pricing. So what is carbon pricing? Carbon pricing is the practice of requiring the industry to pay a tax or price for each ton of carbon emissions, including carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. These methods are used to cover the cost of climatic pollution and to incentivize polluters to cut emissions. With this method, the polluters will be made to pay the external costs that the economy, communities, and animals currently bear. By using carbon pricing method, industries will try to reduce their pollution by spending money on cleaner and more effective fuels, technologies, and processes. To minimize emissions in all important sectors such as energy, transport, and industry, charges should be based on existing prices. In addition to significantly reducing pollution, carbon pricing has also been shown to foster strong economic growth by keeping prices low for consumers. Carbon pricing can be implemented in a number of different ways, and more countries and regions are doing so every year. Carbon taxes, cap and trade system, and combination of these two are some of them.
Does sustainable living really matter? Do our choices actually make a difference? The simple answer is yes, but there's more to it. Addressing sustainability challenges related to climate change and environmental degradation, individual choices don't make the difference, but they do make a difference. Individual actions are part of the collective. They are valuable contributions to a larger, stronger movement aimed to reduce human impact on the environment. Similarly, in living a sustainable lifestyle, the benefit goes beyond your own household. The community, economy, and environment thrive.
This slide will discuss the magnitudes of households' carbon footprint in Iskandar, Malaysia. First of all, the study explores the household carbon footprint and its relationship with selected socio-economic demographic variables in the Iskandar region of Malaysia. For information, the household carbon footprint is one of the largest contributors to global greenhouse gas emissions at 24% of total emissions. Therefore, it is very important to measure the carbon footprint of the household in order to reduce it. One of the best ways to measure carbon is through the economic sector and the daily activities of households, where in that way the carbon footprint of a country can be identified. From the result, the largest carbon footprint was evident in a medium-high-cost urban area estimated at 20.14 tons of carbon dioxide, while the carbon footprint found in a rural area was 9.58 tons of carbon dioxide. The study reveals a higher carbon footprint in urban areas compared to rural ones, depicting the effects of urbanization and urban sprawl on household lifestyles and carbon footprints. Hence for the recommendations to reduce carbon emissions areas, controlling the unsustainable lifestyles of urban and rural households by planning long-term planning in creating a more sustainable society. This is because the creation of a more sustainable society is necessary to reduce the carbon footprint, especially in metropolitan areas. This study studies the carbon footprint of Indonesian palm oil production. The potential use of palm oil as biodiesel to reduce dependency on emissions from, but the deforestation and overuse of peatland cause emissions by the conversion of land to oil palm and subsequent steps in the production. Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions are from the production process of the initial conversion of preceding vegetation, usually based on land clearing, leading to AC debt. The balance of emission and absorption during the growth cycle of the oil palms, leading to a time-averaged C stock that influences C debt and repay time. Transport to the refinery followed by CPO and kernel production, transesterification into biofuel and further transport to the end users. The results show that in land cover trajectories, more than 40% of conversions within the plantation area were from the logged over forest, with nearly 50% of it from high-density logged over forest area. 3 level of engagement from plantation companies could be taken, while international rules are still under discussion. To avoid debt, conversion should be conducted from shrub and grassland with an above-ground C stock of less than 40 tons CH. To minimize carbon debt, companies should set aside conservation areas which are hot spots of C stock, to allow natural succession to happen and therefore to achieve co-benefits of biodiversity conservation as well as reducing C stock emission. To neutralize and rehabilitate larger areas in different places to achieve comparable sequestration, but certified emission reduction.